over the last year, the Chinese have been showing interest in having some sort of communication and discussion with us. So there have been opportunities for us to talk about our intentions, and what our understanding is that they are now more willing to talk to us and have effective communication, so that they would know us better, and that would help their judgment as well. From the encountering with them, we get the impression that many of the understandings about the DPP in the past is primarily because they don't have direct communication with us, and their understanding to a certain extent is very much influenced by the KMT. And we do intend to continue having quality dialogue with them.
What about this, the platform, pro-independence platform of the DPP?
Oh, you mean our charter?
Do you have any plan to shelve that? I mean, there's some proposal about this.
You mean this coming party congress, and there's a proposal to freeze the Taiwan independence provision. Well, again, this is a very important thing for the DPP, I mean the charter. And any amendment to the charter is something that requires a lot of discussions and consensus building. So we haven't started that yet. And the thing has to be fully discussed by the party, especially this is a very, very fundamental principle that the DPP has been following. So I think this is something that requires consensus building, and I haven't really had this feeling that this is something that the party members think that is something that we should deal with as a matter of urgency.
Dr. Tsai, hi, I'm Victoria Jen from China News Asia, and I'm also the TFCC president. And thank you for hosting this event, first of all. My question is, what is your personal take on the proposal to freeze the pro-independence platform? And what is the DPP's plan to engage China after Zhang Zhijun's recent visit? Thank you.
Right, as I said, any amendment to the charter is a big thing, and that requires a lot of consensus building, and especially this issue of Taiwan independence is something that members of the party think is a very, very fundamental issue for the party. So, but my sense is that the party members, I haven't really had a sense that they think this is something that requires an urgent treatment. So I guess this would be, something that people would talk about, but I don't expect that people will make an immediate decision or make a decision in the short run.
But what is your personal view on freezing the pro-independence platform? You don't think it's necessary in order for the DPP to have a better chance to, to build better relations with China? Look,
as the chair and someone who has to guide the party in the discussion of the matter, and it won't be appropriate for me to express my personal view at this moment. So what I want to reiterate is that this is something which is which requires a consensus building, and I don't think we have a sense of urgency there.
Benjamin Ye from AFP. How do you look at the meeting between Zhang Zijun and Mayor Chen Ju? I mean, is it positive? I mean, if yes, in what way? Thank you.
It's positive in the sense that it happened. And the two people meet. Met.
Two DPP.
Chen Ju met with Zhang Zijun actually in her capacity as the Kaohsiung City Mayor. But as I said, the fact that he is a member of the DPP has certain meaning in terms of the DPP's relationship with China.
Hi, Chairman Tsai, my name is Peggy Chang with Voice of America. I have 2-3 questions. First, how do you evaluate DPP's current relations with the United States? And second, there are in the China side, or some people in Taiwan, or on the US side, a lot of people kind of feel like in the previous presidential election, DPP's policy toward China is not very clear. Do you have any plans to make it more clear to the voters or to all sides? And what do you plan to do toward that front? And what is your view on a potential Ma Xi meeting? Thank you.
Look, the situation now is very different from what it was in before 2012. China has changed its leadership, and Obama was re-elected as president of the United States later in 2012, and people in Taiwan somehow modified their views towards China, in particular in the area of this economic integration. So, and with the failure of the Ma administration in terms of getting people happy with their performance, I think the situation is very different now. Particularly, there is a possibility that the DPP will come back in 2016. So with that sort of expectation, people, all the parties, interested parties, will have to reassess the situation and would, to a certain extent, make changes to whatever plan they made, let's say, in 2012 or earlier. So what I'm trying to say is that the situation is very different. We're facing a situation and that is still developing, so I think all the parties involved are now still observing the changes and trying to have a good assessment of what will happen in the future before they sit down and make a serious decision as to what sort of adjustment that has to be made. And Ma Xi Hui, I think Ma Ying-jeou and China are in a better position to answer that question. And if you, I'm sure you noticed this exchange between Zhang Zijun and Wang Yiqi about this 一念之间. So I think they're better positioned to answer your question.
Oh, I have another question. So after Zhang Zijun's visit, is the DPP planning on making any changes in its current China policy to better engage with Beijing?
It's too early to say things like that. I mean, the most important thing for us to do is to develop good dialogue and communication with China, so that we will not be having misunderstanding towards each other. And this is the most important thing. And they started to be sort of more interested in having this direct dialogue with us. And I think that helps. So this direct communication and dialogue with us will help them understand what our intentions. And what is also important for them to know is the public opinion here, especially after the Sunflower movement, student movement, and they realize that perhaps they didn't know enough about the Taiwan society. So that very much reflected in Zhang Zijin's visit, especially the shaping of his agenda.
But Beijing has also made it very clear that it has no tolerance for any pro-independence platform or stance. And so how do you see this dialogue is going to develop? Don't you think that's going to like impose some limitations on your future dialogues?
Depending on how you look at the situation, especially when China says that they have zero tolerance, in the diplomatic world, you never think things that way. I mean, there's always flexibility somewhere, so as all the parties involved have this will to make it happen.
Sorry, my name is Jenny with the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much for taking my question. You talked about that in your dialogue or in DPP's dialogue and communications with China, there's always flexibility somewhere. So in that regard, what is DPP's flexibility when it comes to China? And also you talked about that China has been showing more eagerness to communicate with DPP. Can you give us a good picture of what the communication has been like between the DPP and Beijing, through what channel you've been talking to each other, what can we expect in the future, and can we expect maybe you heading there or vice versa, something a bit more concrete than just we're talking. Thanks.
Right. I think this meeting between Chen Jie and Zhang Zijin is an example of this direct communication. And Lai Qingde's visit to Shanghai is another example. And earlier on, my economic advisor, Lin Quan, led a delegation to China. It's a delegation of about 10 people, and they had a good visit in China. They talk about economic policies, and they exchange experiences with the people in China who do economic planning and do and make economic decisions for the Chinese government. So I thought that was a good exercise. I mean, we talk about professional issues and how to do economic governance, and we share experiences in terms of managing the economy and finance and that sort of thing. So that is, in my view, the quality and positive dialogue between the two sides. And we don't talk about individual commercial cases and commercial interests of a particular company of that sort. And this is how we differ from the KMT. So what was your next?
Flexibility?
Flexibility. Anyone who is familiar with this management of external relations, flexibility sometimes will present itself when you are having this interaction. So when you're having interaction, you talk to each other, and you understand the other side better, then you know how to exercise that flexibility and where to find that flexibility. Without interaction, it's so difficult to find flexibility when you're so much apart.
Just a follow-up question. When it comes to negotiating or talking with China, what's the bottom line for DPP?
This has been said so many times over the last few weeks. That is, of course, the future of Taiwan is to be decided by the 23 million people here. That's the most important thing. And really, we want to get China's respect for what it is now here, including we do have a governmental system here, and we have our own way of life, and we have our own values to preserve. So these are the kind of things that we have to make sure that while we are trying to improve relationship with China, we would not be losing whatever we have now.
Klaus Bahnhang with German TV and Radio. I'm taking this one.
Yes, please.
So I've been hearing from some young Taiwanese lately, students, people who sympathize with the protest movement, that they've been a bit disappointed with the way the DPP was behaving around the Zhang visit. For example, the way that Chen Ju said Taiwanese should show more hospitality.
Right.
And they say that, quote, the DPP seems to be becoming more like the KMT lately. So are you doing anything to integrate these forces into the DPP, or do you risk losing their support?
Well, it's not a matter of having or losing their support. It's a matter of constructing a healthy relationship with them. So you can't expect them to fully support our position, or they share the same position as ours. After all, we are a political party. They are members of social movements. So our agendas are different, and our goals are different. So we, in certain cases, we have common objectives, and we work together. But we, as political party, are bound to have differences with them. And this is something that we have to be realistic about, and we would let them know that it's something that we just cannot deal with the matter in the same way as they did.
But, I think, doesn't the DPP owe a lot to the movement? I mean, they succeeded where the DPP didn't in raising consciousness and making people aware of certain problems. So, I mean, what do you feel? What does the DPP owe to these current movements?
Well, I think in any society you have political force, you have social force as well. What has been lacking in the Taiwan society is the social forces. But with the sunflower movement, we see this social force gaining grounds in Taiwan, and people paying attention to what they had to say. And it is good in the sense that it raises the awareness of the people here. But at the end of the day, you need political party to deal with the politics here. And also you need political party to get the government to function. So we are not competing with each other. We and the social forces are not competing. We're doing our own jobs, and we play different roles, but our objectives, to a large extent, are the same.
from the New York Times.
Hi, Austin Ramsey from the New York Times. Going back to the subject of meetings between representatives of the DPP and the Chinese government, I'm curious, in these meetings, how is the subject of One China policy or Taiwan independence or Taiwan sovereignty, how is this handled in these meetings? Does the Chinese side say, you know, we believe in the One China policy and we want to hear what you believe, or do you state your beliefs, or is this just sort of put aside to discuss
I think at the moment both sides seem to have this idea that meeting is more important, and let's get to meet and try to put aside this sensitive political issue.
You mentioned you know, the possibility of a DPP victory in 2016. You know, at that point, the Chinese side won't let you put those things aside, and you have to expect that they will demand some sort of statement or clarity or some sort of consensus upon which they can continue to meet with you.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we have to sit down with them to find a way for us to work with each other and to find a basis of some sort, and build a basis of some sort. But I don't think time is right yet.
Sweet.
主席您好，我是日本共同社的记者，因为是日媒，所以英文不太好，不好意思。就是主席你刚刚有提到，就是说，跟对岸的直接对话跟沟通是目前现阶段最重要的一个工作。那这样子会帮助他们了解我们的 intention。那你可不可以就是先跟我们讲一下，说 DPP 的 intention 是什么？然后你刚刚也有提到，就是说非常就是我之前有非常多的记者也问过你同样的问题，就是说 DPP 的中国政策到底是什么？然后你的回答意思就是说现在太早，不然就是现在不成熟。可是2016年是在2年以后，所以呢，我们在2012年选完之后，我们就只有听到主席就是说，我们希望能够在互动中了解中国。可是现在大选是2年之后。那我们听到的也是希望能够跟中国直接的对话跟沟通。那我们知道就是说，中国共产党对台的策略其实非常清楚的，他们就是要走进台湾的稳定社会，入党入心。那所以民进党的中国政策到底是什么？就是说在基本教义派的拉扯之下，民进党的实际具体政策到底是什么？然后另外就是说。对美国的政策的部分，我们知道就是说，在2012年总统大选之前美方人是对民进党的这个重回执政，其实是有些质疑的。那在这方面好像民进党这方面就是主席方面也有因此得到一些教训，所以在也提高了对美国方面的宣传，就是说，比如说想想论坛成立了英文版。然后基金会跟党部也有进驻了很多英文比中文都还好的这个优秀人才似乎在就是迫不及待想要跟华盛顿表态，就是说民进党是非常重视美国这一块的。可是就是因为在高度重视美国这一块，凸显了对于日本的漠视。那举几个例子，就是说网站想想论坛的网页其实也没有日文版，然后。基金会日语的人才我不知道是不是有。那党部的话，就是国际部以前有一个专门负责日本业务的副主任，现在也没有。所以主席是不是觉得说日本这一块其实是不重要
的？日本很重要，所以我们会赶快去找一个日本会讲日文的人到党部来那但是我也必须要诚实的讲我们会找会讲英文的，比会找那个会讲日文的容易那这个可能是台湾长久以来的一个问题包括外交部都有这个问题，就是日文的人才是比英文的人才少，非常非常的多那长久以来我们跟日本都维持 一个好的关系哈。那所以大概是因为关系都是平顺的，所以有时候也没有特别去感觉到说要特别处理的地方，但是没有特别处理，并不表示我们的关系不好，反而是说这个关系其实是一个稳定的，而且是一个平顺的关系了哈。那我刚才用英文其实也讲过哦，就是说2012年以前的情势跟现在情势其实是非常不一样的情况哈。那2012年之前，中国面临的是政治交班哈。那美国的奥巴马总统也面临了2012年的这个连任的选举哈。那在2012年选完以后，其实不论是中国还是台湾啊，其实都面临了新的情势啊，尤其是在马政府的执政不利的情况下，它这种人民对政府的这种信心跟支持度才是持续的下降。那么在这种情况下，这个各方对于这未来情势的评估，其实现在都还在进行当中。也就是说，在这些情势在变更当中之后呢，之中大家会在时间成熟，大家会坐下来，做一个决定是政策是不是要调整，要调整到什么程度啊？但是对民进党来讲，民进党其实是一个不是一个领导人说了算的政党，民进党是一个基层比领导阶层重要的党。所以任何重要的决定，其实它必须是有一个党的共识的过程，尤其是在重大的决策的过程。所以我们现在也其实是开始跟我们的党的内部开始有不同的层次的对话哈。那也希望就是说，当时间到的时候，我们必须我刚才讲的 flexibility 的时候呢，我们有足够的 flexibility。那 flexibility 来自于几个方向，第一个就是说，我们的支持者跟我们的党员对未来的自信心，如果他们对未来是有自信的话，我们可以有的flexibility 就比较大啊。那第二个就是说，中国在整个亚洲的变动的情势里面，他希望看到一个什么样的关系，对台湾的关系。那我相信在这么复杂的情势里面，中国不想看到一个对中国不友善的台湾，他也希望就是说台湾跟中国的关系能够维持一个稳定的关系。所以在这种中国跟在亚洲之间其他国家的互动的这些越来越复杂的关系里面，如果有一个稳定的台海关系，对中国其实是非常重要的。那从这个角度来看的话，我相信我们刚才讲的 flexibility 也会从这里某一种程度会出来。Is there a need for me to translate what I said just now? Or your Chinese is so good that there's no need for translation?
这个主持人是德国东军社，不能讲德文，讲中文。
德文那已经完全没有办法了。
就是那个就是张志军来访，最后草草的结束回去了，然后接下来又发生就是台湾的一些就是关于民主交流的人士跟香港之间的往来有一些的不是那么的顺利。那么目前有些观察是说，北京方面可能是不太能接受台湾的 civil society 跟香港那边的力量产生了共荡以及更多的交流，这个对他们来讲可能是一个比较全新的局面。而您刚才回答有提到说，他们可能对台湾的这个 public opinion 这个部分并不是琢磨的太多。那么就您的立场来看，如果说这个台港这方面的交流会日趋增多，以及公民社会的觉醒日趋强大的话，那么在台湾跟中国的交流，会不会产生一个怎么样实质上的变化，或者是形式上会有什么样的改变？那以民进党的立场来看，你是不是乐见这样子的力量的觉醒来影响两岸之间的关系变化？谢谢。
我是觉得，不论是台湾的社会也好，或者是中国也好， 都必须要了解一件事情，就是我们现在能看到的公民社会啊，那这些不同的团体或者是个人，他们的行为，他们所做的事情啊，都是他们的自主性的作为啊。政府或者是政党在一个民主社会里面是没有办法去影响他们的，也不应该去影响他们啊。那我也希望中国可以理解这一点啊，因为或许在他们的社会里面，他们觉得政府或者政党是可以影响公民社会的行为啊，跟他们所做的事情。但是在一个民主国家，尤其像台湾这样的地方啊，公民社会他们自主性的这种作为啊，不是政府也不是政党是可以去影响的事情啊。那但是我们也必须要承认，就是说公民社会哈，他们这种自主性的作为，它可以改变社会里面的人对不同的事情的想法啊。那也因此，它会创造了不同的政治环境。那身处其中的政党，在处理特定的事情跟关系的时候，也一定会受到影响。所以我希望就是说，无论是中国也好，或者是国民党也好啊，他们应该要学习尊重这些公民社会的力量啊，也承认他们是一个可能改变国家的政策的一股力量，因为它会改变人的想法，会改变社会的意见跟社会的氛围。
香港跟台湾之间可以琢磨一下。
所以香港的公民社会跟台湾的公民社会，他们之间相互的互动，其实它是我刚才讲，这是他们的自主性的行为啊。那他们可以相互的协助或者相互的支援到什么程度，也是他们自己的决定啊。那我不认为政府或者是政党应该插手其间。那这样才让这个公民社会有它一个自主性的存在啊。某一种程度啊，在我们过去看到的台湾的情况，它也会改变人对很多事情的想法，反而它会反过来主导一个政治的情势。
因为我们在用中文，那我就continue用中文。好。主席，我想问一下，就是有关刚刚我问的问题，就是那个 bottom line 的问题。那您的回答是说，DPP 的 bottom line 就是要尊重台湾人的选择，我们2300万人的选择。不好意思，因为这样子的回答，其实国民党也一直用这样子的回答，所以这样听起来两边的回应是差不多。那我想问的是，就是说现在除了9·2共识之外，DPP 跟 KMT 当然是不可能在9·2共识上有任何的 agreement， 但是除了这以外，我们可以说 DPP 现在还是一个 pro-Taiwan independence party 吗？还是要等到全代会之后大家决定后再决定要怎么样去 describe DPP 呢？
我想再讲一遍哈，我们跟国民党还是不一样。国民党对于台湾的前途有2300万人的决定这件事情，他在不同的时候有不同的讲法啊。选举的时候他会讲的比较接近台湾一点，不选举的时候他会离台湾比较远一点啊。那所以我们在这个事情上的坚持跟从创党以来的态度其实都是一样的啊。那我们对于台湾的这个问题我们民进党的立场其实很清楚啊，只是大家故意去把它放在一边。其实民进党的台湾前途结语文里面都已经写得很清楚了啊。那台湾前途结语文到现在为止还是民进党的最重要的文件。所以你问我民进党的政策在哪里，就在台湾前途结语文里面。
Hi, my name is Donnie with Bloomberg News.
I'm sorry, let me finish this.
I'm sorry.
Just some addition. 但是台湾全民决议文其实它是在一个特定的时间点，它对于我们的党纲的一个诠释啊。所以你问我们党纲的现状是什么？那它就是在不同的情势底下，它有不同的决议文来解释，来诠释这个党纲。
所以我可以说 DPP is a pro-Taiwan independence party， 这样子的句子对现在来讲是对的。
这个好像是媒体用的比较多一点。
对，所以可以吗？因为我有被 correct， 我被更正过，所以我很想知道说我要怎么样去解释。
真的，那我要先问一下，在什么样的情况下，在什么时候你被更正过？
就我们等一下聊。可是我很想这样，我们要形容 DPP 的时候，在文章里面，现在应该要怎么样去形容？因为好像 pro-independence 这个是不是又讲得太笼统了？就是又不完全代表 DPP。
我觉得，从民进党人很多的角度来讲，你倒不如说我们是 pro-Taiwan 的political party。
Would it be safer to say self-determination? If you say 23 million people decide the fate of Taiwan, that is a self-determination policy.
Yeah, that's. But we like to use something, the term like democracy, democratic process, as a basis for making decisions. So, 如果你要形容民进党的话，应该是讲我们是一个民主政党。Right, I'm sorry.
Okay, my name is Adeline. I'm with Bloomberg News. I have very easy questions for you.
Thank you.
Hi, how will you lure sports to your party, especially what is your target for the municipal elections in November? And when you mentioned the opportunity of returning to power in 2016, what is the odds? And do you mean that by more than 50%? And are you interested in running that election? Thank you.
Really easy.
Easy question. No, the first one is not easy. You're asking the possible result of the year-end local election.
That's right.
It's a difficult question to answer because we haven't seen a settled situation yet, and as I said, the things are still developing, and we don't know at what point in time whether KMT wants to change their candidate at a particular place. And I can give you my experience of 2010 and 2012 election, especially 2010, that 5 major city election. We have strong candidates from 5 cities, and people thought at that time that we stand a very good chance to get at least 3 cities. And it was actually very likely we could get 3 cities. But there was a gunshot just the night at the night just before the voting date at 8 o'clock, and some people suggest that this timing is particularly interesting because it happened at a time that's 8 o'clock at night. So you can't do anything about it because after 10 you can't have any sort of election activities. So that changed the result of 2010. So I'm not suggesting that KMT would do something like that this time, but I use that as an example to tell you that they are unexpected things. Probably planned, probably not planned. We don't know.
But presumably, no accidents, no dramatic situations like that. Many are expecting that DPP can increase more seats in the elections. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's very likely that we will increase our seats after the election, but it's a matter of how many. So on the optimistic side, you want a number?
That.
On the optimistic side, we'll probably be able to get as many as 9 or 10, but no guarantee. Look, this year-end election is going, in terms of its scale, it's probably the largest election ever happened in Taiwan. So you have, in many places, it's 7-in-1. In Taipei, it's 3-in-1, but in many other places, it's 7-in-1. You have 7 elections happening at the same time. It's a complication, and you don't know what would happen while we are going through all this voting exercise. So, and we are also concerned that we are a political party. We don't have party asset. We don't have that much money, and we don't run the government now. So we are not in a position to make use of the government resources. We shouldn't be using government resources, even though we're in the government. But our competitor is very good at that. So there are disadvantages that we are suffering. And in terms of grassroots organization, I have to admit that the KMT has a much solid grassroots network than us. They spent almost half a century to build that network with a lot of investments because they're so rich. They have money to invest in building this grassroots organization. And it turned out to be a very useful mechanism at the election, especially at the last stage of the election, because you have to mobilize people to vote. And this turns out to be the best mobilization machine for the KMT. So in a way, many people thought that the government, the Ma government, does not do well, and therefore it would not do well in the election. This may be true for other political parties, but not necessarily true for the KMT. Their elections, especially local elections, to a large extent, depend on their local network and how much resources are available for individual candidates and for the party. We are hoping for the best result, but there's no guarantee at the moment. And over the years, we have thought this. The voters here will not make up their mind until the last month. So the poll that we have now, whatever shown by those polls, are actually the reflection of people's mood at the moment. It's not a decision.
So we can expect a more drama, probably.
I hope not. I mean, after 2010 and 2012, I mean, no more drama.
Then how about 2016?
Oh, I hope not. But this time, we'll be more alert. And we will tell the public to be more alert.
Right, but you mentioned that the odds of winning the presidential election. So when you said possibility, it means more than 50%, right?
Do we have to be that accurate? But to win the election, you have to get more than 50%.
Well,
unless it's a three-party race.
No, if you have the possibility of 50%, then you win.
Yeah, but last time in 2012, if you sort of recalculate the votes and basing on 2 instead of 3 competitor situation, so our votes in 2012 should be around 47 or 48%. That means we have 2 or 3% away. But to win an election, a presidential election in Taiwan, you need a little bit of that, you know, because meaning that you probably have to get like 53 or 54% of votes, because at the end of the day, there's always this KMT special forces coming out to you know, try to change the result.
Thank you.
And you have to interpret the special forces, right?
Sorry, so from just you've mentioned, it seems that DPP is an underdog. So are you going to do something special? I mean, how are you going to lead the party to win, to get a better result in this coming election?
Well, I guess what we are doing in Taipei City is illustrative of our plan, that is want to gather all the non-KMT forces together. So, so at the end of the day, you'll not be seeing KMT versus DPP, is KMT versus the rest. So that's why we're trying to form this, we call it 在野大联盟 in Taipei City.
So are we going to expect more 在野大联盟 in other 县市?
Well, we may be, working with non-KMT, non-DPP forces, and some counties or cities we may not have our own candidates. But not many though, because we almost nominated all the for all the cities. I consider that a difficult question. No, we're still considering whether we should have our own candidate there. It's a very difficult place, Guardian. One of the most difficult places. So we're still considering. No decision yet. And KMT would like to ask that question too.
Thank you. Tsai Ing-wen, Martin Williams from Campaign Compliance. Just to follow up that last topic, what is the DPP actually going to do? It's a bit early, but what sort of tactics are the DPP going to use to actually try to do what Chan Shui-bian did very successfully in 2000, which is to win over KMT voters?
In
the year 2000, when he got, I'm sorry, in the year 2004, when he got more than 50% of the vote, he got a 10% swing. Now, a very good chunk of that 10% must have been KMT grassroots voters.
No, we do have people in the middle though.
Swing voters, so to speak.
Swing voters, yeah. But bear in mind though, he was an incumbent at that time, and you do have this advantage as an incumbent.
But if you were to run in 2016, there will be no incumbent.
Yeah.
So
my own estimate is that the incumbent has this 4 or 5% advantage. But you are right. 2016, there will be no incumbent.
I have another question on more national affairs, if I could.
I didn't expect that you have so much interest in the election here.
Well, all politics is local.
Right.
And it's to do with a characteristic of the two Ma terms to date, which is a gradual increase or a decrease in the distance between the activities of the ruling party and the functions of state, including the enmeshing of the two, so that sometimes the actions are indistinguishable. Some examples I might raise are the Novotel incident, the Novotel incident that occurred a few days ago.
Oh, yes.
Room service.
The room service.
That's right, where there is a suspicion that intelligence agencies and law enforcement operatives are working on behalf of party interests rather than state law. Right? Other examples recently would be Mr. Jin Pu-tong going to the National Police Agency. Now, these things have been discussed at length in the press, both blue and green. But this is something that's been happening actually since the very beginning of the Ma term, starting with, I believe, regular trips to the KMT headquarters by members of the cabinet to give reports. And I recall that those little trips were did not really attract the opprobrium that I would have expected at the time. The reason I asked these, I put this in as background, is because I'd like to ask you whether you think Taiwan's law enforcement and intelligence agencies are chronically politicized. Do you think that Mr. Jin Pu-tong has overstepped his function as Secretary General of the National Security Council? And what is the DPP going to do about it, if so? Thank you.
The answer to the first two questions is yes. And the third question is what we can do about it. As a ruling party or the opposition? Which one?
It's the kind of problem that would mean, if these things are true, these are problems that surely could not wait for you to be in office.
Right, but the thing is that the political system here is such that since the Jiang Jieshi and Jiang Jingguo days, the political system has been such that the president has this absolute power. Despite the fact that people may not like the president, but he has a lot of power. So the opposition, especially in opposition without enough seats in the legislature, can't really do anything about it. Especially this intelligence services, the police forces, and in many sectors of the government, people working in those systems tend to be sharing the same ideology as the KMT, because after all, they have been controlled and nurtured by the KMT for a long time.
And yet, Huang Shiming was sentenced to a prison term, which is perhaps evidence that the system itself at times rises above partisan behavior. In other words, there are separations of powers in play. I mean, what function do you see the DPP playing? What role does the DPP play in nurturing that kind of separation of powers, or developing a situation such that the next party that takes power doesn't make the same mistakes as the last party?
Well, I think the president himself or herself is very important. He has to, or she has to learn to limit his or her own exercise of power, and show respect to these different government agencies and branches until we have a chance to amend our constitution. And you talk about Huang Shiming being sentenced guilty, and I don't think the judiciary is that consistent. At the first level trial, it may be better. because the judges tend to be younger. But the second level trial and third level trial, I don't have much confidence in that. Believe me, I have been a professor of law for 15 years. But in terms of the prosecutory system, it's the mindset of the people working in that system, especially the prosecutors. They thought they were government officials. They were civil servants. They had to follow the instructions of someone above, like the president. I think perhaps in the mind of Huang Simi, he thought the president was is someone he has to follow his instruction. And this is something that they are used to since the Jiang Jieshi days. The judiciary is, especially the prosecutory system, they're so used to this idea that following the instruction from the above.
Would a Tsai Ing-wen presidency commit itself to reform of that attitude?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's not a matter of reform. It's my position, my attitude towards, and I am someone probably that does not really reform, because I have this idea in my mind already. So it's the president's determination to prevent herself or himself from excessive exercise of power. And it's also the responsibility of the president to guide the country to amend the constitution. Otherwise, the government is not going to be an effective government, and you don't have guarantee for whatever freedom that is guaranteed by the Constitution.
Chairwoman Tsai, I asked a question to you earlier about DPP's relations with the United States under the Obama administration. Our friend from the Japanese media think that DPP has put a lot of effort in improving relations with the U.S. from some would think the low point from a couple of years ago. How do you evaluate DPP's relations with the Obama's administration as of right now? And do you see any improvement that needs to be made with communication with the U.S.?
I think, of course, there are always room for improvement. And Su Zhentang, when he was the chair, he set up this office in Washington, D.C., which is good, so that we have a presence there, and we have people there to follow the development there, so we get a better understanding of what is happening in Washington, D.C. And we have Joseph traveling to D.C. on a regular basis, and this is a good thing for us. But you may ask me why we didn't do it earlier. I am very embarrassed to tell you that we didn't have the money back then, because we were heavily in debt in 2008. But after 2012, our finance has been improved substantially because we have more votes and we get more subsidy from the government, so we're better off now. So money does make a difference in certain sense. But we continue to have this good interaction with the U.S. government and U.S. Congress. But of course, they are anxious to know that whether we have new ideas or how we're going to deal with China. So the same applies to China. China is wondering whether we will come up with some quote-unquote flexibility in terms, so that they can find ways to improve relationship with us. But at the same time, can I say something off the record? but your camera is there. Is it on? Oh, good, yes. Something positive.
Regarding Taiwan's joining TPP or ASEAN, do you or DPP have different thoughts? I mean, which one is more important? I mean, Taiwan should work on joining the TPP first and then ASEAN, or vice versa?
We don't have a particular preference or priority or sequencing for that. I mean, for us, if we have an opportunity to join, then we will do whatever it takes to get in. So, but what is more important for us is to get us prepared for this possible entry into this different regional economic blocks. So when I say get ourselves prepared, I mean, one, we have to do a lot of industrial reform and industrial restructuring. We can't rely on this low-cost production to get market access to other countries. It has to be higher quality, higher value products for us. And secondly, we have to sort of reform the weaker sectors here, like agriculture, because when we negotiate with others on free trade and other trade liberalization, the most difficult part is always agriculture. But what is good is that we got Japan negotiating for this entry into TPP, and Korea may also be negotiating. And normally in the past, we have set up this pattern that whatever Japan and Korea has agreed is also acceptable to us, you know. So, so when Japan and Korea negotiate, we watch closely because at the end of the day, it may be something that we can use as a basis for our negotiation.
So any political aspects?
Political?
Yeah, because it's, some people say it's more about the balance, right? We are getting closer to China, or?
Well, I guess what, yeah, many people thought that without China's giving a green light, we won't be able to get into these organizations or regional economic integration. But I think China doesn't have China doesn't have this complete. China is not completely free in making this decision of this kind, because China has to consider whether it wants to face a friendly or unfriendly Taiwan. Given the complicated situation that China has to face in this part of the world, China has to deal with the American, has to deal with the Japanese, and China has South China Sea issue to deal with, and a lot of other issues in the region. So if on top of all this complicated issue, you have Taiwan that is not so friendly with China, it makes China's life rather complicated and difficult. So I guess if I were the leadership there, I would try to maintain a decent relationship with China, with Taiwan. If the intention is to maintain a decent and stable relationship with China, with Taiwan, China will have to listen to what the Taiwanese people have to say. So, so in that regard, I think China would, as I said, China is not completely free in making its own decision. He has, China has to watch the development. So important thing is that if we make effort to improve relationship with China, then China would under certain pressure to work out a way for us to be part of these arrangements.
Lady in the back.
Thank you. You mentioned that you sense Beijing is willing to be more flexible with working with the DPP. But is the DPP also ready to be more flexible? And if so, how flexible are you willing to be? And what would be different if the DPP will be elected in 2016 and hold the presidency? How would things be different, or will you just actually agree to a lot of the economic deals that are being blocked right now? And would Beijing in the end still get what it wants, which is a Taiwan that's much more economically linked to China?
Well, I think we have to live with the realities. I mean, for China, Taiwan is something, a reality that they have to face, and China is a reality that Taiwan has to face. So if we don't find a way to accommodate each other, then at the end of the day, we won't have a relationship to maintain. But we don't intend to do it in the KMT way. We do it our own way. KMT has been much criticized by the way it conducts the cross-strait relations. Particularly, it does not give out enough information and provide the public with the information when it conducted a negotiation with China. So this transparency has been a problem, and democratic process is also a problem, and the management of the relationships. But we intend to do it differently. That is, we work with the civil groups, we work with the general public here, and we work with the industry people that may be affected by these economic arrangements. It's a matter of whether you are prepared to be transparent, whether you are prepared to be patient, whether you are prepared to be in a position to communicate with people affected by all these arrangements. And sometimes it's so time-consuming and requires a lot of patience to communicate. And but there's something you have to be careful about, is that trade negotiation requires a long time, and it's very tedious to conduct a sort of negotiation. But if you do have a political agenda in mind, you have a political timetable, it's the worst case scenario for trade negotiation. And this is exactly what happened in the past. So come back to your question, whether we can deal with the trade negotiation better. The answer is yes. And you can't have this trade negotiation dictated by the political agenda. That's the key.
Have you met Hillary Clinton?
No.
Any interest in meeting Hillary Clinton in the near future?
Why not? This is the same.
What are the chances?
This gives me this impression that this question, the way the question put to me is very much the way the question put to me a while ago. That is whether I would like to meet with Deng Zijun. Right. So yeah, why not? Well, yeah, but don't make it a headline story tomorrow. But I guess this won't make a headline. Deng Zijun is something for headlines, but this is not a meeting with Hillary Clinton. Right. There are many other women leaders around. Why did you mention Hillary Clinton?
In the context of the role of the United States in Taiwan's defense, I think it would be a fairly interesting meeting to have.
But
particularly before the both prospective candidates are under pressure from their respective campaigns.
Right.
Would it not be a case of opening up dialogue space with the United States?
But what she said a while ago is a timely reminder for people here, though. So I guess that's it for today.
Well, thank you very much for coming over here. I know many of them know my cell phone number, so I'm sure they'll go call me. But thank you for coming over.
Right, thank you.